Alright, hey guys, this is DKY here, or Ryan if you want to call me that. Um, so this is kind of an impromptu video that I'm making in response to a bunch of random questions that I keep getting regarding, you know, the source engine, the visibility system, when do I func detail a brush, and that sort of thing. And I feel like a lot of people have some random misconceptions about it, and I really, really want to clear this up. So I didn't plan this video in advance or anything, so I'm just kind of making this up on the fly. Okay, so here, to demonstrate, well, before I begin, I have to preface this by saying that in order to really understand func detail, you really need to understand how the source engine's visibility system works under the hood and why func detail is actually important and why we need it. All right? If you don't really like fully understand this, or at least have enough of an understanding of like how the visibility system works, like it's pretty futile for me to like give you advice on what to func detail and what not to func detail. All right. So here's a quick demo map. All right. So let's say we have this really basic map. It's just a cube, right? Like I have my info player start. I have a suit or whatever, and let's just say I have this crazy expensive prop here that needs to be drawn by the game. All right. So let's just do a quick compile, make sure this map works and can actually compile. That's not the map that I want. Come on. Okay, there we go. Press begin to compile. All right, cool. So let's load this map. Great. So we're in this map. Okay, very basic map. It's just a cube. Cubes are very easy to render. There's basically nothing in here that would impact visibility, right? And if we want to say show what is going on under the hood in this engine, we can turn on wireframe mode and we can kind of see what is being rendered. In this case, there's only six basic cube shapes and this crazy weird model that we're rendering here. Okay, just a moment while I close this door. All right, so what's going on here? Well, nothing really. There's nothing really important. It's just six basic cube faces and this model. So nothing really going on that's very interesting. However, let's say this airboat is like some crazy expensive prop, right? And it's like, it's dropping my FPS to 2 because it's like got all these polys and we're bad at making optimized models and whatnot, all right? Okay, great. So in that case, if we had this problem, well, what can we do to deal with this? Well, most levels aren't really just cube shapes, right? Often there's like walls and stuff that stuff can hide behind. So like let's put a wall here. Let's color this orange just to make it more interesting. And let's say there's like we have this this backwards C-shaped hallway sort of deal going on here, right? Where we have this wall that's dividing my player and this prop that's super expensive to render, right? So if I do this, I run another compile, and let's take a look at what that did. All right, here we are. So here we are. We have this wall, and we have this prop here, and so in an ideal world, what would happen is if I'm behind this wall and the prop is behind this wall, like, this wall is between me and the prop, ideally the engine would not render the prop because it's not visible, right? So let's say I step here. Oh, now it is visible, so therefore the engine should render it. So we haven't solved the problem. Let's say it's like super expensive, but like in the case where it is expensive, you can control what is being drawn at any given time by putting walls in the way, making sure that stuff can't be don't get drawn when they don't need to be, right? So you kind of reserve the FPS drop to when you really need that FPS drop and you need to start rendering it, all right? Not that it matters, because like honestly most computers can handle like super poorly optimized source maps pretty well in this day and age, but like this is still good practice to have anyway, all right? So if we turn on wireframe mode again, here we go, we can see, hey, look, the airboat is not being drawn until I have the possibility of it being drawn, right? So I hide behind the wall. Oh, it's not going to be drawn. Oh, so the engine's actually smart enough to figure out that if you're behind this wall, you're probably never going to be able to see the airboat. So it's never going to actually draw that airboat, using whatever Z sorting or probably Z buffering or whatever algorithm it uses to figure out what to draw on top of what, okay? So there we go. Very basic optimization. You'll notice that even if I'm over here where you can't see the airboat, the engine still thinks there's a probability that I might see the airboat, so it draws it anyway just to be safe, right? But if you notice, if I go here, at this point the engine's like, okay, there's just no way you're ever going to be able to see it no matter where you are behind this wall. So at this point it's going to be like, okay, great, I'm not going to draw the airboat. No point. Okay? So that's the basics of visibility optimization in the source engine. Now you might be wondering, how the heck does the engine figure out whether or not to draw the airboat? And that is the question. You may notice that there are three main phases of compilation. The first is BSP, the second is Viz, and the third is rad. I've turned off rad because I don't have lights in this map, but like, you know, that's an important thing. For the purposes of this video, BSP and Viz are the important things, right? So the way visibility works in the source engine is kind of in the name of BSP. BSP stands for binary space partitioning, and the way that works, just to give a very, very quick dumbed down summary of what BSP is BSP takes the level's geometry, specifically the level's geometry and spatial areas, and divides it up into sections. All right, these sections, ultimately, if you to very, very simplify it, these sections are what we call leaves, or viz leaves leaves for short. Viz leaves are the full name, and that stands for visibility leaves. What the heck is a visibility leaf? Well, let's take a look at this guy, right? Take a look at this map. The rules of a visibility leaf is a section of the map that is convex. And, well, that's really the only real rule. It has to be convex, and it forms one of these spatial areas, right? So clearly, we can't divide this map into a single viz leaf, because if I tried to make this entire area one viz leaf, that doesn't really work because we have this wall in the way. We have to be able to divide it along the brushes that we create. Okay. So what the engine is probably going to do, let me take a screenshot. Again, I did not really plan this out, but whatever. So let's take a screenshot of this guy, and let's throw this into Paint so we can demonstrate what the heck might be going on, right? So during the BSP phase, this first part of compilation, it's going to divide the level into viz leaves. Some people think this is in the viz stage. That's wrong. It's in the BSP stage. Okay. So looking at this, we have these these four solid walls here, and this one solid wall in the middle. BSP will divide the space of the map into viz leaves by cutting alongside any walls that might be convenient to cut along. So let's make some cuts of the space. So we might want to, probably the one that makes the most sense to me is I would probably want to cut along this wall right here. That would make one cut, thereby creating three viz leaves. Let me go ahead and draw that a little bit more straight here. So here, by making this one cut, we have divided the level into three viz leaves. One is, well, let me change the color to something that makes sense. All right, let's make another one. So we have one viz leaf over here, this big viz leaf on the right, and we have another viz leaf here, and we have one more. Oh, I can't use MS Paint. I'm not very good at it. I usually use Photoshop. Anyway, one here, and probably another one over here. Right? So now, by making that one cut along that wall in that direction, I have divided the space of the map into three separate viz leaves. Okay? So why do viz leaves matter? Viz leaves form the possible space that the player's camera could be in, right? Because it's empty space. So theoretically, your camera could be in any one of these three viz leaves at any given time. Now, once BSP makes these cuts and cuts up the space into these viz leaves, the visibility portion of the compile stage will take over, and it's going to say, okay, now that I have divided the map into viz leaves, which viz leaves are capable of seeing which other viz leaves? And that's the important bit. Okay, so let's number these. Let's say this is let's freehand this because I don't really have any better way of doing it. So let's say this is viz leaf 1, this is viz leaf 2, and this is viz leaf 3. Okay. If you look at this, we can draw kind of like what we call a visibility matrix. It's kind of a fancy term, but like here, this is probably the best way to visualize what's going on. All right. Here's our visibility matrix. All right, and let's say like on the left side we have 1. This is terrible. Okay, so 1, 2, and 3. Right, up here 1, 2, and 3. The job of the viz step is to build this visibility matrix to determine which viz leaves are visible from which other leaves. So, first of all, let's say I'm in viz leaf 3, right? Because that's where my player spawn point is, right? Which viz leaves can viz leaf 3 see? Well, obviously viz leaf 3 can see itself, so like that's kind of trivial. So yeah, check, great. Viz leaf 3 can always see itself, but can viz leaf 3 see viz leaf 2? Yes, it can, because it's kind of trivial. It's like literally right next to it, right? So yes, viz leaf 3 can see viz leaf 2. Okay, but can visleaf3 see visleaf1? Well, no, it can't, because there's a wall in the way. There is no possible way for visleaf3 to see visleaf1, so therefore that cannot happen, right? And then let's repeat the process for visleaf2. Visleaf2 can see both visleafs 1 and 3 because it's next to both. So trivially, if I'm standing in this visleaf, I should be able to see both 1 and 3. So, and trivially, it can see itself. So 1, 3, and 2. If you're standing in visleaf2, you can see everything. Okay. Now in visleaf1, if I'm standing in visleaf1, can I see visleaf1? Well, yes, I can, because I am my own visleaf, so of course. But can I see visleaf2? The answer is yes, I'm right next to it. But can I see visleaf3? No, there's a wall in the way. So this is the visibility matrix for our map, okay? And Viz's job is to take these visleaves and determine which visleaves can see which other visleaves. That's basically all this does. When it's doing this, run this base portal viz and portal, whatever. That's what it's doing, okay? It's just pretending. If I have a camera in one of these visleaves, which other visleaves could it possibly see, okay? So we can see this in action if we actually go to Hammer, right? After you run a compile, there is something called a portal file that is generated by the tools. We can load the portal file by going to map and then load portal file. As long as you don't have a leak, one of these bad boys should be generated, okay? So here we can see that these blue outlines show that the divisions between the visleaves. And in fact, BSP in this case cut my map into exactly the visleaves that I predicted. We have one visleaf here, one here, and one here. And these blue outlines show the borders between the two visleaves. A border between any two visleaves we call a portal. All right. So if you're wondering what this number here is, right here, what the heck is it? Where is it? Where is it? Yeah, there we go. Num portals. This number. Some people ask me what this number means. A portal is just a border between two visleaves. Right. The more portals you have, the more complicated your map, and therefore the longer viz will take, probably. Some people get obsessed with like minimizing this number. Like, you really shouldn't be too worried about this number overall. Like, you should be thinking about other things in terms of like how to optimize your map. This is a pretty poor way to determine whether or not your map is optimized. But if this is some like crazy number in like the several thousands or something like that, then you might want to think about decreasing that. Okay, so here we have 3 visleaves with 2 portals, right? Now, what if I change things up a bit? What if I, let's say I take this and instead of cutting it horizontally like this, I cut it kind of like this, where I do the opposite. Instead of making a horizontal cut, I make a vertical cut. And let's say my airboat here. By the way, let's unload the portal. So unload portal file, right? So now my airboat is here, right? And now I have this shape, right? It's pretty similar, but it's you know, it's a pretty similar shape, but it's not exactly the same. So let's see what BSP and Viz, well, BSP more like. Let's see what BSP does in this case. So let's rerun the compile and let's load the portal file again and see what cuts it made. Okay, so the cuts it made are very interesting, right? It's not quite the same. So let's we have 2 portals here and here. So again, we cut it into 3 different Viz leaves, but it's not quite the same. So let's take a look. Let's snip this guy and let's do some basic computation of this. Let's get rid of this guy. Yeah, there we go. So here's our map again. So as we can see, what Viz did here, well, not Viz, what BSP did here, I keep messing that up even though I know my own mistake, is it cut the Viz leaves in a slightly different way from last time. So let's mark that up here. So it decided to cut along these 2 faces of the brush. By the way, it's pretty hard to predict like which way BSP is going to cut these Viz leaves. So again, oh my god, not again. So once again, it has divided the space into 3 leaves. The first leaf is here on the left, and then we have this like tiny little crappy little Viz leaf in the middle right here, and then we have this another Viz leaf on the right. So again, 3 Viz leaves. Let's number them just to make our lives a little bit easier. So 1, this weird one in the middle is 2, and then we have 3 here. Okay, and let's try and draw our visibility matrix. So once again, let's draw our matrix, right? 1, 2, 3, and then 1, 2, 3. So by now, every Viz leaf is visible to itself. We can just check down the diagonal here. That's trivial, right? Can Viz leaf 1 see Viz leaf 2? Well, the answer is yes, it can. Can it see? Sorry, my microphone did something weird. Okay, so can Viz leaf 1 see Viz leaf 3? Well, it can, you know, all you have to do is just look from here through visleaf 2, and then you would trivially see visleaf 3. So there we go. What if I'm standing in visleaf 2? Can visleaf 2 see visleaf 1 and 3? Yes, it can. It's kind of similar to the last situation. What about visleaf 3? If I'm standing in visleaf 3, can I see visleafs 1 and 2? Answer is, once again, yes, for a similar reason to visleaf 1 seeing 3. If I'm standing in visleaf 3, all I have to do is kind of look through visleaf 2 and I can see visleaf 1. So there we go, check and check. So we have an interesting visibility matrix where every visleaf is clearly visible to every other visleaf. Okay, now that that is the case, what will happen if we run this in game? What are the implications on rendering? You can pause the video now and you can, you know, mull that over, but the answer is it won't do a damn thing to visibility because everything is visible from everywhere else. So let's run this and actually see what's going on, right? So here we're in visleaf 1 right now. Now we're in visleaf 2 and now we're in visleaf 3. In all 3 visleafs, I can see this air boot because the air boot is in visleaf 3 and I'm in visleaf 1. 1 can see 3, so no matter where I am in this map, there will be no visibility culling. There will be no optimization whatsoever. This is bad. This is completely useless, and it completely defeats the point of having this visleaf system. So what the hell do we do? How do we deal with this? Like, I don't want this guy to be drawn if I'm standing over here. Well, we're kind of screwed because BSP decided to cut the visleafs in a way that was suboptimal. So Valve, and I don't know if like the guys at id came up with this, but like someone at some point when designing this engine came up with, saw this problem, and they were like, well, crap, if we need to have some way of controlling the visleafs sometimes, otherwise, like, you know, otherwise situations like this would happen and then you'd kind of be screwed. So real quick, what would be a better way to cut visleafs than the way that BSP decided to go with here? If you want to pause the video and think about it for a moment, I will wait. Okay, so the better way to cut visleafs in this case would have been very similar to what we had before. So let's say let's get rid of this guy, right? And if we had cut it this way instead, let's draw a line. If we had cut it this way instead, that would have been much better because then we would have had visleafs that turn into this shape. So we'd have this, and this, right? That would have been better because in this case, if we number them from 1, 2, 3 again, 1, 2, and 3, now if we had done that, our visibility matrix would have looked very different. 1 can no longer see 3, and 3 can no longer see 1. So 1 can't see 3. Oh, sorry, that's the wrong one. I did a bad thing. So 1 can no longer see 3, and 3 can no longer see 1. Right? That would have been better because there would have been some visibility culling going on. If I were standing anywhere in visleaf 1, I would not be able to see anything in visleaf 3, and so therefore the airboat would not be drawn. This would have been a better way of doing it, but alas, BSP decided not to cut things this way. So how do we deal with that? So there is a mechanism to control how BSP cuts visleafs, and that is using something called the hint texture. Right? Something called a hint brush. Not this purple one over here. Purple hint. Okay? If you make a brush that has this hint texture on it, let's make a new brush that has this hint texture. There you go, like this. Then it will force BSP to cut along that brush in order to make a visleaf. So let's save this guy. And let's rerun our compile. Let's load the portal file again. And bam, look at that. We have forced BSP to cut along a much less stupid cut to form our visleafs, right? So now we have forced BSP to comply with what would have been a more optimal solution for our visibility. Make sense? Okay, so if you're wondering what the heck these purple hint brushes are for, that is why. Hint brushes force BSP to cut along a particular edge. Okay, sometimes you don't want to cut along all 6 edges of a hint brush. So oftentimes what you'll see is that you'll like have most of the faces will actually be covered in skip. What skip does is skip forces BSP to just straight up delete that face. It just won't exist to the compiler. And then only one of the faces will be textured in hint, right? So this will force BSP to cut along this edge, but it'll ignore all the other ones, right? So that's what happens if you... So what I would have done is I probably would have done something like this, you know, put along here, right? just to keep the hint brush as small as possible, right? So if I do this, right, it will cut along this hint face, but it's going to ignore this skip face, right? So let's, again, if I run this map again, and then whatever, if I load the portal file, absolutely nothing should have changed, right? You can force BSP to cut in really bizarre and weird ways. So like if I had done something like, I don't know, something really stupid like this would have been a crazy awful way to to cut viz leaves, but I can do this, and if I do this, it'll force BSP to cut along this line. So map, load portal file. There you go. Yeah, see, once again, you can see that BSP has created a portal here for absolutely no good reason. I don't know why I would ever do this, but like, this just demonstrates that you can force BSP to cut along certain edges and lines using the hint brush. Okay. All right. So here's an exercise. What if we have a very classic problem? We have an L-shaped wall, an L-shaped corridor, right? So we have this very, you'll see this a lot in a lot of levels, right? You have this L-shaped corridor going on. Let's unload the portal file because that's getting a little distracting, right? So here we have this really super expensive object like on the other side of this corner, right? And I'm like over here. What would be the best way to divide viz leaves? Like, there are a couple of ways we could divide our viz leaves here. And probably BSP is going to choose one of two ways. Let me go ahead and screen cap this guy so we can go over that in Paint. Okay, so let's clear this guy. So in here, there are two possible ways for BSP to split this map into viz leaves. The first and most obvious way is just like cut a line down here, and if I do that, I keep making that mistake. So if that happens, then I would have viz leaf number 1 that looks like this, and I would have viz leaf number 2 that looks like this. All right. The other way that it could have done it would be, let's make another one of this. Put this over here. The other possibility would be cutting along the other edge like this, right? And we have viz leaf 1 over here, or the viz leaf. It doesn't really matter how you number the viz leaves. I just do that for example. And viz leaf number 2 over here. Okay. In both cases, the visibility matrix looks very similar. In fact, it's identical. So let's say here we have 1 and we have 2, and here we have 1 and 2. All right. In both cases, the visibility matrix looks pretty much the same. I will just go ahead and do that real quick to save you the trouble. So here, the visibility matrix is much simpler than the other one, by the way. It's just we only have 2 viz leaves, so there's only 2 cells. Oh, there's only 4 cells. So where the heck am I? All right. What was that? That was weird. I am bad at MS Paint in case you haven't determined that by now. Wow, why did that happen? All right. Bear with me as I struggle. All right, there we go. So we have 1 and 2, 1 and 2, right? In both cases, the visibility matrix is the same. 1 can see 2, 2 can see 1, and of course they can always see themselves. So, and in this case, 2 can see 1 and 1 can see 2. So like in this case, visibility is completely bogus and there's no point because both viz leaves can see each other, right? Let's compile the map and see if that's actually the case. Compile the map. Let's take a look at the portal file. Oh no, okay, so it chose, so it decided to cut the portal over here. So it chose this version on the left, right? Okay, well, since every viz leaf is visible from every other viz leaf, this will have 0 effect on visibility, and so no optimizations will occur. So, yeah, I'm standing all the way like on the edge of this hallway, and the engine is still drawing that airboat, even though there's no possible way I could see it because of this viz leaf problem, right? No matter where I am in this entire map, I will always be able to see the airboat according to the visibility matrix, and therefore no optimizations will happen. Right? No culling will be applied. Well, crap, that's not good. So, real quick, what is a better way that we could have cut these viz leaves for a more optimal result? I'll give you a few seconds while I copy over another one of these things. Okay. So, counterintuitively, and this is kind of a weird concept for some people, for a lot of beginners to grasp, in this situation, it is actually better to have more viz leaves than fewer viz leaves. The best and most, well, in my opinion, the optimal way to cut viz leaves is actually on the diagonal, like this. did not do that correctly. There we go. Kind of like this, right here. If we had cut along this diagonal like this, we would have gotten a much better result. Why? Well, now we have 3 Visleaves, and we have Visleaf. Where's my pen? We have Visleaf 1, we have Visleaf 2, and we have Visleaf 3. Okay, now we have actually increased the number of Visleaves. We actually increased the complexity and probably increased the compile time as well. In this case, the map is so simple it doesn't really matter, but like in a much more complex map, this would have possibly increased compile time. Let's go ahead and draw our visibility matrix, which is less simple now because there are 3 Visleaves going on. Blah, 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 blah. 1, 2, 3. Wow, that was a terrible 3. 1, 2, 3. Every Visleaf can see itself, so check along the diagonal there. Can 1 see 2? Yes, it can. Can 1 see 3? This time, no. 1 cannot see 3. If you are in this space, there is no possible way you can see anything in this space. Makes sense? So no, 1 cannot see 3. Can 2 see 1? Yes, it can, because it's right next to 1. Can 2 see 3? Yes, it can, because it's right next to 3. Now I'm in Visleaf 3. Can 3 see 2? Yes, it can. But can 3 see 1? No, it cannot, for the same reason that 1 couldn't see 3, right? So this is actually better. Now, if I'm standing in Visleaf 1, I won't be able to see anything in Visleaf 3. And so the engine, if I'm standing in Visleaf 1, will cull and not draw the airboat. Okay, so so how can we force Bsp to cut diagonally like its instinct is to cut along these solid edges. Like it's not going to do this. It's not smart enough to figure this out, right? So we need to help it along, and that's what hint is for. A hint, kind of like its name implies, gives a hint to Bsp that maybe you should cut it this way instead, not a cylinder. What the heck am I thinking? Wow, why is that on cylinder mode? That's weird. Okay, it's like what? Okay, so again, let's do the skip thing. It should be all skip, and let's cut it along the diagonal just so we have something to. There you go. Actually, well, I'll talk about this later. So we want this diagonal face to be our hint, and let's enlarge this large enough so that it crosses the edge like that. And of course, we want it to be the full height of this. Okay, so now we have this bizarre diagonal cut. It's going to force Bsp to make a cut along this line, which is more in line with our optimal setup right here. And ideally, if we compile again, we should see that happen. Map, load portal file. And there we go. Bsp has decided to take our hint and cut along this weird diagonal line that it never would have thought to do. All right, let's reload this map and see. Look at that. I am now in Visleaf 1. I cannot see Visleaf 3, and therefore the airboat is not getting drawn. But if I cross into this Visleaf 2 in our diagram, I can see both 1 and 2, and therefore the airboat is drawn. But not until I cross this portal will that airboat be drawn due to visibility calculations. Cool? All right. So this is basic hint brushing. This is basic visibility control based on map geometry. The optimal hint brushing and Visleaf division highly depends on the situation. Sometimes you need to make some crazy bizarre cuts, and sometimes it's really not worth it. Okay? As a level designer, it's kind of up to you to determine, what is the best way to go about doing things, right? Obviously, adding more Visleaves is going to add to the compile time, but sometimes it can be worth it if it means a better runtime. Of course, once again, in modern computers, this sort of optimization usually doesn't matter that much. But if you find yourself in a situation where it does, it can help a lot. All right, so that's Visleaves and Visleaf optimization using hints. Now let's get rid of this. So now we know how Visleaves get cut by Bsp, and we know what the heck a portal is, and we know how the visibility matrix works. Let's unload the portal file because that's getting distracting again. Okay. Now that we have this, what if we have hold on. What if we have a crazy weird brush that's like, let's go back to the cylinder thing. That gives me an idea. What if we have just like a pillar in the middle of our map, like this, right? What the heck will this do to our visibility? I don't know, actually. Actually, yeah, this is probably a good example. So we have this random pillar going in the middle of our map. It's pretty common to have pillars in the middle of maps. Like that's a very common architectural style. We do that a lot in peer review and hazard course and whatever other mods I may or may not be known for. Okay, so let's Actually, before we even compile this, how would BSP even deal with this guy? Like, what would that even look like? Let's make this larger to just to, you know, just for example. Well, take a guess while I snip this screen and put that into Paint for us to see. Okay, here's our map. If I were BSP, again, remember how BSP divides space. It divides space into convex shapes along solid faces. So here's a solid face here. I'm probably gonna like do a cut kind of like this or something like that. That's probably what I would do if I were BSP. And I'd probably make another cut kind of like here or something like that. And then I would cut along this face too. So then I'd probably just do something like this. Then one here. I might do this too. And then so basically we're starting to get a whole lot of really ugly as hell Visleaf cuts that make absolutely no sense. I mean, they make a lot of sense, but it significantly makes this a lot more complicated, right? So now, having done this, we end up with how many Visleaves? Wow, that's a bad color. No, stop. This color. Okay, we have ended with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 Visleaves, one of which is like tiny and stupid, right? Just by doing this. All right, and ironically, this is a really, first of all, this is clearly a bad Visleaf cut because you have a whole bunch of random Visleaves that literally do nothing. And like the worst thing of all is this extra complexity in the visibility matrix gives you zero benefit because practically every Visleaf can see every other Visleaf, more or less. Like maybe Visleaf 8 can't see Visleaf 3. I don't know. But this, by and large, does not help with visibility at all, but it adds a lot of complexity, and if you have a lot of these in your map, you're going to see vvis taking forever to compile if you have a lot of this going on, right? So let's compile this and see what BSP decided to do here. Load portal file. Okay, so it's not as bad. Okay, it's pretty bad. Yeah, so I don't even know what it decided to do. Oh, actually, this is kind of what we predicted, kind of. Except it made the first cut here, and it made the last cut there. Okay, so this is kind of what we predicted, right? So we end up with like 8-ish Visleaves, oh, actually more than 8 Visleaves that do basically nothing. Wow. There's one here too. Did I miss one? I think I missed one. I don't think I missed one. But, anyway, the point is, this pillar is bad, because this cuts Visleaves for no reason, and it does not benefit the visibility algorithm whatsoever, right? So if we do this, run this, compile, and then run this in the map, we can see that it has zero effect on whether or not this airboat is being drawn, because the airboat is literally visible from everywhere. And that kind of makes sense, because this big pillar, it doesn't really do a whole lot in terms of visibility. Actually, let's make this pillar smaller, just because most pillars are not that big. Okay, so here's our smaller pillar, just kind of in the middle of the room or whatever. Let's run Bsp and Viz again, and then let's load portal file. Unload portal file, and then map load portal file, damn you. Wow. Oh, did I not save? I didn't save. There we go. Always remember to save your maps, kids. Alright. So, and now that we have this pillar being even smaller, this is even like a more ridiculous like way to cut Visleaves, because like we're cutting around this like this tiny little like section of the map where I can't be in for no real reason. Like if I try to run this map, right, like this pillar basically never blocks any visibility of note. Like there's no point in having this factor into the visibility calculations whatsoever, because there's just no point. Why would it? Like there is no Visleaf cut that this could possibly make that will help the visibility algorithm. That's my point. So, how do we solve this? Well, what is a better way to cut Visleaves rather than this crappy thing? Well, here's one way we could do this. All right. One thing we could do is we could forcibly put a hint brush like around this guy, like a very square hint brush like this, right? If we did this, then, well, it's not optimal, but it's still kind of better for the compilation purpose, because like our Visleaves would probably look something like this, and probably like this, and then probably like this. And then we'd have a bunch of smaller viz leaves in the middle there. So I'll draw some lines. Like we might have another viz leaf cut like here. We might have one cut like here or something like that. I'm literally just making this up. I don't think BSP would actually be that smart to do it that way. But all right, here's a possible way that it would cut viz leaves. We would end up with 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. I can't count. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. All right, we would end up with 12 viz leaves if we put a hint block around this, kind of like that. And it's not ideal. We're still complicating the visibility algorithm for no real good reason, but this is still better because, well, you don't end up with these random portals kind of like being emitted from thin air like that. In general, like keeping your portals aligned to grid and as simple as possible is better for the visibility algorithm because the math just works out better. It's just easier to do it that way. And so if we did this, it's more ideal. Because especially because like if I had like another like column here or something like that, that would end up like further dividing the space, and that would cause absolute chaos and nonsense in the viz leaf world. Whereas if we have like an extra column here, like suddenly that's not too bad, right? It would still be more or less orderly. This is still not ideal though, but let's try that and see if we can make a dent in our viz leaf madness. All right. So here we are. Oh, not a cylinder. Make this a block. We don't want this to be a cylinder. Okay. So let's say we did this. If we had done this with our hint brush, and we can take a look at what the portals look like. Okay, there we go. Pretty much what I predicted. Like the madness is kind of contained inside of this like square section, but the rest of it is more or less reasonable, right? It's pretty reasonable. And we do end up with the visibility, the tiny visibility option optimization that if we're standing here in this viz leaf, you won't be able to see this viz leaf. Okay, that's basically never going to happen though, so that doesn't really matter too much. But you know, it kind of makes sense, right? If this were a wider pillar, then that would actually do something, right? So let's actually do that. Let's make it wider pillar, so that we can demonstrate the fact that that would actually be more somewhat helpful, right? And let's hide this guy behind this pillar over here. Okay. Once again, do this load portal file. All right. So by doing this, I have contained the madness in here, and I have probably caused the visibility algorithm to act. There we go. See, if I hide behind this pillar because I'm in this in this viz leaf over here, right? If I'm in this viz leaf here, if the airboat is here and I'm in here, then the airboat cannot be seen from this viz leaf. So like some visibility optimizations will happen. By the way, if you you can visualize which viz leaf you're currently in by doing r leaf. Actually, hold on, leaf, find leaf, mat leaf viz 1. All right, and then turn off this wireframe mode. It will draw this red line around the portals of the viz leaf that you're currently in. So currently I'm in this left viz leaf. Now I'm in this bottom viz leaf here, and now I'm in this right viz leaf, right? So you can visualize which viz leaf you're currently in, and that'll tell you how the visibility algorithm works, kind of under the hood, all right? And as you can see, if I'm in this bottom viz leaf, according to the viz matrix, this bottom viz leaf cannot see this top viz leaf, and therefore anything in this top viz leaf will not get drawn. Make sense? So you can kind of manipulate viz to manipulate BSP and viz to do stuff. All right, so. And if we had deleted this guy and we had compiled it like this, map load portal file, we would have had this nonsense going on where like there would be basically no visibility optimization whatsoever. And so if I had not done that, this guy is now visible everywhere, no matter what I do. And you can see that the viz leaves I'm in are kind of in nonsensical positions. Oop, there you go. These weird triangular viz leaves that just kind of don't really make sense. Right. I can even be in this tiny viz leaf in this corner right here. This is the most pointless viz leaf ever because like it does not help at all. So, anyway, but most pillars are not this big. Most pillars are pretty tiny. Like here's a tiny pillar, right? So if I have this kind of pillar, and I do this, If I look at the portals, there's really not much you can really do to optimize this guy. I can do this. I can do this, you know. But, like, again, if I had done this, load portal file, what are the odds that I end up in this tiny visleaf here or here? That's the only situation where this is helpful. In this case, if I'm in this visleaf, I cannot see the visleaf immediately opposite me, right? It's pretty unlikely that the player is ever going to spend significant time in these tiny sliver of a visleaf, right? So the visibility optimizations that we're going to get are almost non-existent. They're basically just never going to happen statistically, right? And by the way, this prop is large enough that it won't even fit into that one visleaf. It's actually it straddles multiple visleafs. So even if I were like standing here, like I could still see it because it's still in the other visleaf. So like who cares? This is ultimately a useless portal division. It would have been better if this pillar had just simply not existed at all, right? So the way that again, Valve and whoever designed this engine gave us a way to control which brushes actually cut visleaves. And their mechanism for doing that is called func detail. Let's unload this portal file. Func detail, so it's usually the default entity that you get when you tie it to a brush. So let's tie a brush to this entity. It's literally the first entity that pops up if you turn this brush into an entity. That's because func detail is super important. Func detail tells BSP to ignore this brush when it's cutting visleafs. So if I do this, run compile again, map, load portal file, bam, there are no portals. Look at that. It's as if this guy just simply never existed to BSP, and this whole thing is just one giant visleaf. Huh. And that's because it is. Func detail tells BSP that this brush should not cut visleafs. It should not factor into the visibility equations at all, and it should not affect the visibility matrix. And that makes sense for this kind of pillar, where it's just kind of like sitting there. It's very unlikely that it would ever significantly block the player's view. In fact, it's basically impossible for that to happen. So the benefit we get for this not cutting visleafs outweighs the possible optimizations we could have gotten from it, right? So now that we have done this, if you notice, there are now 0 portals because there's only one visleaf. There's no reason to cut this space at all. And so that drastically simplifies the visibility calculations. The visibility matrix is very simple. It's just one visleaf that can see itself. And that makes viz faster, right? Now, the drawback to making a brush not affect the visibility calculations is that it just will not affect visibility calculations. Ooh, why did this? Oh yeah, so when this happens, the leaf viz doesn't really work correctly, right? So now, no matter where I am, this will just never block visibility, which makes sense because it's very unlikely in like normal gameplay. Let's say I'm going around shooting some dudes, right? Like that, whatever. It's very unlikely I'll ever be in a position where this pillar will actually affect my visibility and therefore would be in a situation where visibility optimizations actually matter. Okay? Alright. So by doing this, we can just increasingly add crappy details to the map, and no matter how many pillars I make, this will not affect visibility at all, and the viz compilation will still be just as fast as before, as if these pillars just simply didn't exist. It will not factor into visibility calculations whatsoever, right? And so that is the beauty of func detail. Func detail allows you to tell the compile tools that this object is probably never going to significantly impact visibility, and therefore you should not generate visleaves from these faces, and therefore that would allow viz to drastically simplify its visibility matrix, and that's what you want. Okay. So what are some good candidates for func detail? Well, obviously these random pillars that really don't do anything. What else? Let's say we have like a catwalk. So great. I don't know. Let's pick a fun great texture that we can use to show up. Yeah, this one. Here's a good one. So let's say we had a catwalk that's like here, and let's say it kind of snakes around here. This is the crappiest catwalk I've ever made, but whatever. It's good enough for demo purposes. Right, so we have this catwalk. Let's say we can get onto this level, and maybe there's enemies shooting at us or whatever, right? If I had done this, what would the visibility calculations look like? Well, load portal file. Okay, so it does actually cut visleaves along this grate. In fact, let's Let's make this grate thicker so we can actually see the portals a little better. There we go. See? Now it's pretty obvious that it's starting to cut along. Oh, and it's. I should have made this one that thick as well. Load portal file. All right, so now it's pretty obvious that Viz is making, well, BSP, not Viz. BSP is making completely unnecessary cuts. Why? Well, it thinks that we should divide Viz leaves along these planes, and along, here, but why? What's the point? There is no reason to divide Viz leaves like this, because if I'm standing on this grate, I can see through it. Like, it's transparent. It's a transparent brush. There's no point in cutting Viz leaves like this, right? Right. So if I'm standing here, I'm in this Viz leaf. What's the point of doing this? There is none. I can see right through it, so this should have no real bearing on visibility calculations whatsoever. Why should this factor into Viz? So the right thing to do is to turn these into detail. Right? So now that they're detail, I run Viz again, or run Viz and BSP again, load the portal file. Bam! It's as if these guys just don't exist to the visibility calculations, and therefore, and BSP will just completely ignore this when it's dividing Viz leaves. So once again, this room is one basic Viz leaf. There you go. So hopefully all this makes sense to you guys. Hopefully this will inform your judgment on when you should turn things into detail and when not, when you should use a hint brush and when you should not, and that sort of thing, right? Visibility optimization, like, it is kind of in a lot of ways more art than science. There are some tricky scenarios where like really bizarre hint cuts will actually help you quite a bit, even though they might counterintuitively make the visibility matrix more complicated. But sometimes you need that, but sometimes you really don't. Often my rule of thumb is if I remove everything that is func detail, like let's say I remove all the func details. If I remove all the func details, what is remaining should look like a very simple cubular structure. Should, right? Maybe I have like a wall that divides this guy or something like that, right? Let's make this guy orange. So let's say I have this wall, right? Here's a question: should this be a detail brush or not? If you answered no, it shouldn't be detail, you're correct. This should not be detail because this significantly blocks visibility, and it would be useful to cut Viz leaves along this plane specifically, the top plane, right? Whereas, what if it's just, what if it looks more like, I don't know, some tiny little thing here, or maybe it's a really complicated brush with a lot of interesting geometry that like kind of sticks out and like, I don't know, kind of does this. And maybe like we want to, I don't know, round the corners or something like that. I don't know, something like this, right? Let's do something even crazier. Yeah. So let's say we have this like really crazy like superfluous brush that like is kind of sticking out here, and like we want this for decoration, right? But if I tried to compile like this, we would cut ridiculous Viz leaves for no good reason. So should this be a detail brush? Yes, it should. Because there's really no point in making it do these bizarre Viz leaf cuts, right? But, here's a question I get a lot, actually, on load portal file. What if I have this wall, right? What if I had this wall? It's kind of like this. It does kind of block a lot of visibility, right? So, you could argue very well that this should not be detailed because it does have a significant visibility impact. And you could very easily hide objects behind it and vice versa, right? But it's also a really fancy wall. Like, maybe we added some really weird cuts to it, like at the end or something like that, kind of like that. Or like it has like these random crap sticking out of it like that, and I don't know. And maybe like every so often there's like one of these posts or something. Let's make these a different color so we can actually see them. Dev. Let's make them these hazard stripe material. Right. What if we have this situation going on where we have this really complicated setup, right? And like, should this wall be detail? Should it not be detail? What do you guys think? Should it be detail? Okay, so this is a multifaceted problem, right? These brushes that kind of stick out here, it is very unlikely you would ever, in fact, it is impossible that you would ever be in a situation where these would ever significantly block your visibility. So let's make them detail, right? So these are detail, and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, these are also detail, right? Now the question is, should this wall be detail even though it has this weird, bizarre, curvy surface? Let's actually make it even more fancy because I can. If I had, okay, so now we have this wall that's like nice and fancy, right? It has this like, you know, these rounded corners and whatnot. Should this be detail? Well, we have a problem here, right? So let's see what BSP does to cut these viz leaves. Okay, so it does kind of the sensible thing, and it kind of you know, makes these all kind of rounded. Okay, knowing this, like, would this have a significant impact on your visibility calculations? Probably not. You know, like having all of the nonsense be contained into these edges is actually not too bad. I'm okay with this. You know what? If I were the level designer, I would probably just leave this be. But if you really want to hyper optimize, what you could do is you could lop off this guy, you know, cut this into its own thing, and make this guy detail instead. Right? Now, if I make only this guy detail, then what will happen is, oh, let's get rid of this nonsense. Actually, you know what? Let's not get rid of this nonsense. Let's say this is our map. Okay. Now, if I rerun this again or load the portal file again. Come on, save, run, load portal file. There we go. Now we can see it ignored this weird fancy part and only divided against this edge, which makes a lot of sense. If I wanted to hyper optimize the visibility, that's what I would do. I would make this weird part detail because there's just no point in having it factor into visibility calculations, because like under what situation would you hide behind this wall and have something behind it that needs to not be drawn? Like never. That's never going to happen. Like maybe it will happen like 0.00001% of the time. It's just not happening. Okay. So if I do this, and once again, if I have that old rule of thumb where if I disable all the func details, the room looks pretty blocky to me, right? This is what it should look like. It should be very basic underneath. The world brushes that are not detailed should be this simple, right? Very basic, very blocky, very easy for Viz to make its visibility calculations, right? And if I re-enable func detail, we have all of the fancy schmancy things that have nothing to do with visibility around here, okay? Or what? Okay, so here's another question that I have gotten. What if we have this thing and it has a roof, right? Again, this is kind of retreading like territory that we've literally already discussed. So let's say we gave this thing a roof or something like that, right? There we go. Let's say this is a house and we have a roof on the house, right? Here's a question: should this be detail? Okay, so in this position, you could make some interesting arguments. Maybe if you're standing here, you don't want to be able to sit on the other side. But let's say these catwalks aren't even here, right? So if I had done this, what do the viz leaves look like? Okay, we have these strange triangular cuts. They're not totally necessary, but like they're also not the worst thing in the world. So in fact, if I were the level designer, I might keep this. I might keep it this way, right? Let's say we have an even more complex roof that's like I don't know, like this or something. This is a pretty common roof shape, right? Yeah. Say we do this. What do the viz leaves look like? Okay. So now we're starting to tread into some weird territory. Like I don't like this viz leaf cut. Like it's okay. Like it's fine. Like if I left this be, I'd probably be okay with it. But most roofs probably have like more complex detailing, and you'd probably end up with like stranger viz leaf cuts. So here's the question: do I benefit from making this detail? Probably a little bit. Probably not that much though. Like I probably don't gain a whole lot by making this detail. So if I do this, load portal file. But like it is admittedly way simpler, right? So like now I remove the func detail. Like yeah, once again we're on this blocky thing, and the only situations where like this roof might have a chance of blocking visibility to a significant extent is if I'm like kind of floating up here. Here's the question: can the player ever get his or her viewpoint up to this kind of area where this would actually significantly factor into the equations? Not really. Like since I deleted that catwalk, it's pretty unlikely that you'd end up over here. So if I remove this from the visibility calculations, I'm not losing a whole lot. In fact, I'm gaining a little bit of compile speed, negligible amount, but I'm gaining a little bit because I have reduced the complexity of the map, right? So here's a situation where like reducing the complexity definitely benefits you. Like you could make an argument that like making this not detail is okay, like it's fine. Like I wouldn't lose sleep over it, but like you don't have much to lose by making this detail, right? So anyway, that's my spiel for today. I don't know. I have never done this sort of level design tips video before, and I literally just made up this entire lesson on the spot. So like, if you have any questions, feel free to send me a comment or a message or something. And if you want me to do more of these, I will be absolutely glad to share my knowledge, because I've been doing this for like over a decade at this point, and this kind of if you do this long enough, you eventually get like a weird sixth sense of what should be detail and what shouldn't be detail. And every level designer, of course, has his or her or their own preferences for what should be detail and what shouldn't be detail. Alright, sorry, my mic broke again. But like, yeah, play around with this and see what works for you. Just the more experience you get making these sorts of judgments, like the better decisions you'll make in your own projects, right? So until next time, if you want to hear more of this sort of thing, let me know. Cheers.